I don't know about you, but I hate when the bad guy wins. If I can gesture to question, I'd say probably all of us have that opinion. Now, I go back to my middle school days, and I was never really the popular kid, but I knew a lot of people. I knew the jocks and the cheerleaders, but I knew the nerds, the brainiacs, the outcasts, the country people. I had a wide group of friends, and it was because my mom and my dad really pushed on me when I was younger to be friends with everyone. And although I'm very thankful for that, it soon turned into kind of awkward when I started to have my friends draw imaginary lines between each other. And what that would look like is the jocks, they kind of draw that imaginary line between the nerds. They didn't want to be with each other. The cheerleaders drew the line between the country girls. They want to be with each other. And that was fine. To a certain extent, I was okay with it. But what really kind of showed me a little insight into human personality is when they would start to attack the person on the other side of that line. Now, I was always pretty neutral. I was kind of a misfit myself. I really like talking to everybody, and seeing as my profession is talking, it probably makes pretty much sense. But one thing that I never liked when I was with my friends is when they started to attack somebody on that other side to make themselves feel better. Now, this took a lot of different areas and a lot of different pictures, but it would happen something like this. Like the jocks would team up and try to bully some of the nerds to try to make themselves look good, slap each other, on the back, high-five each other, just so they could look good. And the nerds, that being smart as they were, and I tried to be, when it came to class, they would try to, make fun of the jocks, try to make fun of people who weren't as smart as them. All through this, I really saw what it looked like for someone to do something bad to try to get something good. Now, in middle school, this was pretty, not as severe. It was still harmful. But all throughout middle school, I really just hated when the bad guy won. Now, as we look into today's picture, unfortunately, oftentimes those things that we started in middle school are still happening today. And matter of fact, in much stronger and a much more serious note. The back and forth that we had in middle school turned into backstabbing today. The gossiping that we had in middle school turns into rumors that ruin relationships. We see around us today what it looks like for people to attack someone to try to make themselves feel better. I've never been okay with that, but it's something we as a society and as people have to look at. Because it tells us something about ourselves, and it paints the picture of why society says the bad guy always wins. It's because if we're faced to be with a ton of bad people, we got to become bad if we even want to survive. But as Christians, we have a counter-cultural view that puts that into tension. We have God who says, no, let whatever happens happen, but you follow what I've commanded. And oftentimes that means not falling into the things that other people fall into. When we look around at all the bad people living good lives, it makes it hard for us to want to live a godly life. When we look at people who lie, cheat, and steal to get to the top of the area, it makes people not really want to live a righteous life that God called us to. Why would I live a righteous life if I can do something that God told me not to do to get to the thing I want? So that's where we're at oftentimes. You see the corrupt business person. And their shady dealings means they're going to have more money than you could ever imagine. And it makes you start to think, could I do that to get there? You think of that person who when you talk to them personally, they're super mean, they're super hateful, vindictive, and to you, they're just the worst type of person, but to everyone else, they seem like the nicest person in the world. And it makes you start to question, what does it really mean to be a good person? Is it just good in society's mind? You might think of the coworker who, while you do everything, like you do all the work, you spend all the time doing all the stuff, you come in and they tell you, hey, I got a pay raise. Now, I might be stepping on some toes because I know that happens a lot. It makes you want to say, why do I even do any work in the first place? Why don't I just sit around and do nothing, and then I might get the pay raise? That tension is all around us, and we as Christians fight against it all the time. Do we fall into doing something bad just so we can get something good? It's not always as easy as that statement makes it sound. As you look at the people around you, as you look at the people you work with, your friends, your family, you see all of them. You see your husband, your wife, or your mom, your dad, your coworker, your friend, your family, your uncle, nephew, niece, whatever it may be. You see them doing something bad, but getting the thing you want, and it makes you question, why do I even have to do this thing in the first place? Because there's a lot of things in life that we want, but if we follow God's word, it doesn't really make it practical. It doesn't really make it possible. And sometimes that sucks. You look around at everyone else around you doing stuff that you know you shouldn't be doing, but that's the only way you can get to the thing you really want. I like to put it this way. If you chase after something God told you not to do, to get something He told you not to have, you'll end up somewhere you didn't want to be. If you do something God told you not to do, to try to get something God told you not to have, you'll end up somewhere you don't want to be. Because you see, the focus is we want things. I mean, that's just human nature. That's what drives us. That's what puts us in the job we are, puts us in the family we are, puts us in the situations we are. We want things. But what is the mindset that we are approaching it with? You see, the people around us, if they don't have a relationship with God, or if they don't even have a center point to what they will and won't do, when someone, I said this morning, says, hey, I'll give you $20,000 if you just fudge the numbers, that becomes a real option if you don't have in the back of your mind saying, that's the wrong thing to do. We face this in our lives every single day. That tension between knowing what we should be doing, but wanting to do the thing we shouldn't to get somewhere. Whether it's more money, whether it's a bigger house, more cars, whatever it may be, we oftentimes are faced with that tension of how do we live our lives as Christians when everyone else around us is doing the things that we know we shouldn't do, but they are succeeding. Those people that they're corrupt, they're shady, that everything that they've been doing, whether it's in a family situation, whether it's in a work situation, whether it's in any situation, you start to question yourselves, should I start to do that? Because if I don't, I'm never going to succeed in life. The tension between seeing people do the wrong thing to win and God telling us to stay the course, that might not make us more money. It might not give us the job promotion. It might not give us the lifestyle we want. The tension that says, no, I'm going to do what God says, might not get you the amount of cars you want. It might not get the story house you want. It might not get you the placement that you want, and people might not see you the way you want. So the tension is, how do I live a life in a world that tells me to do the things God told me not to do to get ahead? This tension is something we face wherever you are in life. But this tension, it goes back for God's people way before they were even called Christians. It goes back to when they were called, when God did most of His work through the nation of Israel. We're going to be looking at the book of Obadiah to see God's people in this very situation. Now, I said in Sunday school this morning, you probably don't know where the book of Obadiah is. Well, that's probably because no one really thinks about the book of Obadiah. But it's a 2-page book in the Minor Prophets. It's right after Amos and right before Jonah. If you want to, feel free to flip there. Now, my Bible has like 1,600 pages and it's 2, so it might take you a minute to get there. But we're introduced to God's people as the Israelites. This was before Jesus came and gave his life as the Messiah, as God in human flesh. So God did most of his work for the nation of Israel. And we call them the Israelites because they're people of Israel. But this was God's people in this time. I mentioned when we first started going through the Minor Prophets that we are often more like the Israelites than we like to admit. Now, oftentimes this is a bad thing, but here it takes on a different light. You'll see what I'm talking about as we go through. But the Israelites, last time we picked up with them, were at the height of, their civilization. They had money, power, wealth. They had all of the things they needed, but we said the one thing they didn't have was a relationship with God. So they went from that big powerhouse and God saying, hey, if you don't get a relationship with me, things aren't going to turn out very well. And that's where we pick up with them. The generation after that has happened. When they have nothing. When they are, just the enemy of everybody. God has said, you don't want to be with me? Fine. Everybody can be against you then. If you want to rely more on the world around you, fine. Deal with them and see what happens. So unfortunately, things started happening one after another that led to Israel just being in disrepair, of being destroyed. In all of this, they start to question, as we often do. In the pit of despair, how do we live our lives? You see, this takes place in this book with the nation of Edom. Now, this nation of Edom comes from Esau, Jacob's brother. Now, the Israelites come from Jacob. That really doesn't matter too much. You just need to know that there's a nation of Edom and there's a nation of Israel. The Edomites and the Israelites. And the book is the relationship between them two. The first 14 verses, God starts to explain what the nation of Edom has been doing. And if you read through it, you start to realize they're not living a very godly life. They are powerful, they are wealthy, they were actually what Israel was the last time we talked to them. Powerful, wealthy, had a great army, had, the allies and all the nations. They were on top of the world. And Israel, let's just say, was not. They had nothing. As a matter of fact, if you read through here, you start to see what it would look like to be an Israelite at this time. Nations destroying your hometowns. Nations coming in, stealing all the treasure you have, all the possessions you have, all the money you have, everything that you have gone. And the reason God starts to get so upset with Edom is that because they start to partake with the other nations against Israel. God comes up to him and he's like, all right, I need to tell you something. So he picks this man named Obadiah and he begins to teach them, or begins to preach them what it is that he is about to do. And it starts, really picks up in verse 2. And it says, I will make you small among the nations. You will be utterly despised. Now, this really doesn't mean much to us unless we realize how great of an army, how great of a nation Edom was. See, they were like the pinnacle of the bad guy winning. They destroyed Israel. They partook in taking treasures. They even sold other Israelites. They had all the power, all the wealth, all the money, and God says, I will make you nothing. Everything that you are, I've allowed you to be, but it will end because you do not have a relationship with me. The nation of Edom, they were very wealthy, but one of the things is they lived upon a mountain. Now, we don't really see casual mountains around here, but essentially the nation of Edom was up on a hill that really nobody could get to. It's like shooting arrows down at people. It's a lot harder to get to them when they're in that position. So they had a stronghold. They had a great army. They had allies with all the nations around them. So they were boasting upon how great they were. And we see God pick up with that in the very end of verse 3. He says, you say to yourself, the Edomites, they say this, who can bring me down to the ground? Or who can bring me down to the earth? Because, they were on that mountain. They came up with this quote themselves. I'm sure they thought they were creative or whatever. But they said, who can bring us down? Nobody. That was the answer. That was the point. That was their battle cries, that nobody can bring us down. We are great. We are powerful. We are wonderful. We are amazing. Look at all the things we've done. And God, in beginning of verse 4, he says, though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars. Now let's stop there. Now I can only imagine this as God just halfway making fun of the nation of Edom. Saying this super sarcastically, like, you soar like the eagle. Oh man, you're just so amazing. You're up on this mountain. You're so wonderful. You're so awesome. You just, bravo, bravo. You're just amazing. And he says, you make your nest among the stars. Because that was their cry. They were like, who can get to us? God says, you are amazing, Edom. Yes, wonderful. But then he says something that I love. So verse 4 says, though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars. Listen to this. He says, from there I will bring you down. This is where God starts to point the focus. Because this was their cry. This was who Edom was. Nobody can bring us down. And he says, you know what? I can and I will bring you down to the earth. Yeah, you've created all these great things. You're so wonderful. You've done all of this stuff. He says, from that, I will bring you down. Because there's no height that you can go that God cannot not get you to. And there's no depth that you can go that God won't put you under. And for the nation of Edom, it's the beginning of God calling them out. And I can only imagine what the Israelites are doing. Now, a fun fact, this is one of the only books in the Old Testament that is not written to, for, or about the Israelites. This letter is not written to the Israelites. It's not written for the Israelites. As a matter of fact, it's not even written about the Israelites. It's specifically for the nation of Edom. Now, the Israelites are mentioned, but the focus is that this was a vision that God gave to Obadiah to speak to the enemy. To speak to the bad guys who are winning. To speak to those people who were, abusing their power to get the things that they thought were great. But Israel is in the background of all of this. And I can only imagine that when Obadiah said, God will bring you down, he told me to tell you that he will bring you down from the stars and bury you underneath the ground. The Israelites start to perk up. They're like, whoa, okay, that's all right. That sounds good. I like what this guy's saying. But on the opposite side, the nation of Edom starts to question things. They're like, who is this guy? Who is this God that they say can bring us down? Nobody can bring us down. And it's that kind of weird little back and forth that goes on through verses 5 through 14, where God is just calling Edom out for everything that they've done. Just calling them out for everything they've done with Israel. They helped steal and destroy all the nations. As a matter of fact, they even made a way for the people to come into there and destroy and all of this stuff. And it's this back and forth where God says, you should have protected my people, but instead of it, you took advantage of them. It goes back to that bad guy winning type thing. So they weren't supposed to be doing that, but they took advantage of what God told them not to do to get the things they wanted. And they were living the great life, while Israel was in the pit of despair. They had nothing. They were broken. They were bruised. They were destroyed. They were outcast. They had no money. They barely had enough food to live. They were truly in the pit of despair. And God says things are about to change. We pick up in verse 15. It's the pivot point of this book, where God goes from just condemning the Edomites to telling them, hey, you know what? Matter of fact, you know that nation Israel that you were supposed to be protecting, that I have a covenant with? You know them, those people that are over there? Let me tell you what's going to happen to them. And he starts with verse 15. He says, the day of the Lord is near for all nations. Now, last time we picked up with the way of saying the day of the Lord, it was when Israel had everything. And God warned them. He said, if you don't have a relationship with me, it doesn't matter what you have, it will all be gone. That's exactly what happened. And the only thing the Israelites were left with was their belief in God, their faith in God. But Obadiah, God says, there will be the day of the Lord for all nations, including you, Edom. That if you do not know me, you will end up with nothing. I will take everything that you have and bury you underneath the ground, so that nobody will know you, nobody will come to you, and nobody will try to be an Edomite. The name will be detestable, whatever I'm trying to say, to all the nations around. But it's not the end of verse 15. Verse 15 says, the day of the Lord is near for all nations. And he says it specifically, as you have done, it will be done to you. As you have done, it will be done to you. Now there are two immediate reactions in two groups of people. The Edomites start to think of everything they've done to the people. Destroyed homes, stolen possessions, killed people, sold into slavery, tortured, murdered. Whatever it was, they start to think everything that they've done to get ahead. And God says, all of those things that you just thought about, everything that came to your mind that you thought you could do to get ahead, the sketchy things that got you past the other people to get the things that you want, all of those things that happened, they're going to happen to you. And they started to get real worried. But there was another whole group of people, the Israelites, when God said, as you have done, Edom, everything that you've done will come back on you. I can only imagine over the whole nation of Israel was a collective sigh. They were just like, oh, thank God. Because we've been waiting for so long for this to happen. Because there was times, I'm sure, when Israel looked around at the other nations and said, guys, I think we're going to have to start being like them. I don't know where God is. I don't know what God's doing, but we might have to start acting like them. I don't know if our relationship with God is going to be strong enough. They pushed through. They persevered. And so when this moment happened, when this pivot point in the nation of Edom, when God said, yeah, everything you've done, that's great. All of it will be destroyed, and the nation of Israel will be restored. It meant it was all worth it. Not giving in to the ways of the world, not wanting to, fall into the trap that the nations around them were. It actually meant it was worth all of it. All that suffering, all that pain, being in the pit of despair was worth it. Because the Israelites learned something very important that we would strive to remember today. In the pit of despair, God is there. See, it's not easy to remember that. And we look back at the nation of Israel, and I do this myself. I'm like, why are you so worried? I mean, yeah, a couple of you guys got killed. I know you don't have any home, I know the nation of Edom is really powerful. I know you're not, but God is always there for you. He always comes back. He always protects you. And so when I read the story of Israel, and they start to act like those other nations, when they start to tiptoe into the things God told them not to do, I'm like, you're so dumb, because God has told you He would be with you. Yeah, I know you're suffering, but he said he will be there. Just give it time. I know God. He will be back. But then when something starts going wrong in my life, I immediately start to question if God's even there for me. Start immediately thinking, well, maybe I should fudge the numbers a little bit to get some more money. Well, maybe I should lie about this thing. It'll give me some more stuff that I kind of really want. But I mean, was God going to be mad at me? What's he going to do to me? I'm here. God's up there. And I immediately fall into the trap that the Edomites were doing and that Israel really thought about doing. You see, I think it's important to remember that we're often like the Israelites, even more than we like to think, because we do question, man, should I give this up, or should I do this? I could get this in return, or, man, I feel like I'm just suffering more. I'm just in more pain. I lost my job. I didn't get the raise. The family down the road, we're doing the same thing, but they got more money, a bigger house. All of these things, and we start to question what God is doing. Then we read the story of the Israelites and the nation of Edom, and they are on the front lines of knowing that in their despair, in the despair of depression, of the despair of pain, of heartache, the pit of just being thrown out and cast aside because of who you are, that pit, whatever it may be, God is there. But it's not easy to remember that. What's easy to remember is what that person down the road did to get the thing he had. What that family down the road did to get the stuff they're doing. That's the easy thing to remember. The hard thing to remember is that when we are broken and bruised, when we have nothing, when it seems like everyone has taken everything from us, God is still there. That's not easy to remember. But God makes it very clear what he's saying to Edom. Because remember, this was hope for Israel, but this was specified to the nation of Edom. This was specified to those people who were evil just to get the good stuff. The bad guys who won. This is what he said. But he said, I am for my people. Those people who live for me, those people who work for me, those people who give up things for me, those people who died for me, who live their lives for me, the people who sacrifice for me, everybody that believes in me, those are my people. And whatever they go through, they are still my people. And you might be winning now, but I will take you and bear you under the deepest depths, no matter how high you are, because they are my people. This is hope for you and me, because God still calls us his people. We aren't the nation of Israel anymore, but we are his followers. We live in a world a lot like the nation of Israel did, where all around us the bad guy is winning. The bad guy does make more money than us. The bad guy does have more fame and power. They do have more. Sometimes it feels like we are in the pit, and sometimes it feels like God's nowhere to be seen. But it's always important to remember that when we are in the pit of whatever it may be, God is still there. God is still crying out to all those people who are doing great in the world, that I will tear you down. Whatever you think you got, it will be burned away and thrown away, because I'm here for my people. And we might not see that right now, and you might not see it in your life tomorrow, and it might not be next month, it might not even be a few years from now till you see him calling you his person. But he will. When you follow him, he fights for you. When you follow him, those nations around you, those people around you, those people at your work who are doing the bad things, those people who are at work who don't do anything but still get the pay raise, those people at work who like to fudge the numbers to get more money, yeah, let them keep doing what they're doing, but you know where your relationship with God is. You know what God can do. As a Christian, there will come a time when someone in your life will pass you by because you've chosen to follow God's laws and not their laws. There will come a time in your family, in your relationship, at your work, when something you fought super hard for, someone else comes and takes because they're not following God's commands. And it will make you mad, and it will make you sad, and it will make you want to just throw everything away to do what they did to someone else. But God says no. Let them do what they're doing. If they get up in the world, say good job. If they step on your heads to get the position you want, tell them congratulations. But that's not easy. That's not the easy thing to remember when those things happen. There will come a time when you look around at someone doing the same exact job as you, living the same exact lifestyle as you, but they got a bigger house, more cars, they got a bigger name in the society, and you start to question, man, what should I start doing to get that? What do I have to give up to really get into that? What do I have to push away? What God has told me to keep close, what do I have to push away to get to that thing? It happens all the time. It's not always as severe as going up against a nation. It's not. But in your life, each and every day, maybe not each and every day, but every day that you live, you'll either get closer to seeing this happen, and you might get closer being tempted with it, or you might see it happening and say, God, things are going tough right now. You might come home to your wife or your husband and say, they asked me if I'd lie for them again, and I told them no, and they demoted me. I'm not getting paid as much. But God is still blessing me. Might be a time when you look around at the families that are similar to you. They're going on more vacations than you. They're driving a nicer car than you. They're working less hours but getting paid more. And those things are going to look really tempting, I promise to you. But where is your focus? It is upon getting what God told you not to get? Is it doing the things that the people around you are doing to get what they get? Because that's easy. That's cake. If you want to talk about living a life and getting up in the world, you can step on a lot of heads real quick to get things you want. But that's not what God called us as Christians to do. When you get passed up for that job, passed up for a pay raise, when your family doesn't want to talk to you anymore, when your friends say, I don't really want to hang out with you anymore, you really aren't going to do the things we want to do, you just say, okay. When that boss who offered you that $20,000 just to fudge the number says, if you don't do that, I'm going to fire you, you say, well, I appreciate the time I had here, but I'll go pack my bags. It's not the easy thing to do. But I'd like to picture what the world would be like if that's the way we did things. The very last line of this whole section says, and the kingdom will be the Lord's. And the kingdom will be the Lord's. See, right now the kingdom doesn't seem like it's the Lord's. It doesn't seem like it at all. It seems like the kingdom is the world's. It seems like the kingdom is the evil people. It seems like the kingdom belongs to those people who are willing to do the things we aren't doing. But God says, the kingdom will be mine. I wonder what it would be like if we lived with that in mind. Instead of thinking about what we could have, thinking about what we'd like to have, I wonder what our society would look like if we lived without trying to get back at someone, without, getting mad at people for doing the bad thing. What if instead of that, instead of getting mad at the person who takes your job, you just tell them congratulations? What if that person who comes in and immediately climbs higher in the ladder than you are, whether it's in a relationship or a job or your family, what if you just told them, hey, congrats? Because that's not what they're expecting. And that's not what you're going to want to do. But if you believe that the kingdom will be the Lord's, it's something you will do. I wonder if you took this into your life back home with you, with your family, with your friends. I wonder what you could do with those people. I wonder what that message would look like. I wonder if we as a church would stop trying to, on the edge, make sure we do enough of this or enough of that. And what if we just live like the kingdom is here and the kingdom is the Lord's, and we stop worrying about all those things we like to worry about? I wonder what the Pressing community and the Pillow community would look like if we walked out of here and instead of fighting tooth and nail to get the next thing, we lived our life knowing that beyond the victory that any bad person can get, God's victory is eternal. That no matter, they might win this battle, they might win this war, but beyond that somewhere, God wins eternally. I wonder what the community would look like. I wonder what the county would look like. I wonder what it would look like for Kentucky to start with that. I wonder what it would look like for us to impact the people around us so that everyone we went to, they said, they're kind of weird, aren't they? They don't do things like we do. There's something different about them. I don't know what it is. But I wonder what it would look like for us and for you to live your life in the pit of whatever you may find yourself in. Because if the Israelites learned one thing, it's they find themselves in the pit of something. And whatever it is in your life, I wonder what it would look like. That you said, God called me His people. And then although whatever pit I am in, I will know this. That in the pit of despair, God is still there. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, it's not always easy to do the things you've called us to, God. Sometimes it's much easier to give up. God, we've all faced some situations in our life where we don't feel like you're on our side. When we're in the middle of something, we want to do something that you've called us not to do, and every inclination in our body is telling us to do it, but there's something in the back of our mind that says, no, that's not what God wants you to do. God, sometimes it means giving up a lot of the things we really want. God, I pray that you would be with us, that you would strengthen us in this, that as we look back on the nation of Israel and say, how arrogant are you for not knowing that God will protect you, that we look at our own lives and the society around us, knowing that whatever may happen, God will call us His people, and He will call us to His kingdom one day. Whether it's today or tomorrow, a year from now, whenever it may be, God. In our despair, in the pit of whatever we find ourselves, it's important, God, to see that you are there. Because if we don't, it's easy to fall away. God, you've given us hope for this book. And I pray that we would be able to take this hope into our own lives, and that we would be able to affect and change those people around us, because we know what true hope looks like. We know what you do to the bad people who win, and we know what you do to the people who call on your name. That's exactly what we do today. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.